It is a pleasure talking to you this evening. So, to start with, can you tell us about your journey as a tester, how it began, and what inspired you to go ahead?
Okay, yeah, and thanks for this invitation. So, how I started as a tester is pure happenstance. I was out of work at the time. I'd been doing like lots of different kind of temporary, like administration based work. I'd not really been working in IT, although I have quite a kind of strong IT background just in my personal life. And I saw a job advert for software testing, and I applied. At the time, I didn't even think about it that much. I needed a job, and then when I started testing, and then I realized kind of the scope of it and what it was, and I started watching lots of lectures from like James Back and Michael Bolton and Fiona Charles and lots of all the different big conferences, all the big speakers, reading all the blog articles. It was very interesting. And then I got really kind of hooked when I heard Michael Bolton talking about, well, he was relating Kem Kainer's idea that software testing is a social science. Now, I've got a sociology background as well, so this was, really kind of interesting me. And then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, how true this is, because
Right.
the kind of technology element of it is just this kind of middle bit. But what we have is we always have humans and other humans interacting in some way. And
Correct.
for us as software testers, it's through the vehicle of this piece of software. So whether that's a website or a phone app, it's created by humans for other humans. Even if
Yeah.
you create some kind of very specialized automated testing utility that will test that is meant to operate independently and headlessly and all of that kind of stuff, it is still going to be testing something used by humans,
Absolutely.
and it's all created by humans. And so how this kind of relates in terms of this into the social sciences, I think is very pertinent, and it's like very interesting to me. So um, the motivation to choose testing was I needed a job. The motivation to want to excel in testing, that was from this pure kind of interest of seeing it as a social science. And I've always had an interest in technology. I've been using computers since a child. I've always been interested by technological advancement, and been using computers daily. It marvels me now that I have a computer in my pocket that I can walk around with, that is more powerful than every computer I had in my childhood put together. It's brilliant to me.
Okay. So, in the years that you've been doing testing, how have you seen testing evolve?
Um, I've I've not been testing that long, so I first started testing about three and a half years ago.
Mhm.
So the changes in that time haven't been huge, but I've definitely seen some. So one of the biggest things that I noticed when I first started testing was there seemed to be a kind of general debate, argument between the kind of context-driven schools of testing and those testers, and a lot of kind of people that were behind the kind of IQ TSV, like the whole ISEB testing qualification. And it seems that argument has kind of gone away. It seems people have kind of generally accepted that an ISEB foundation level testing doesn't tell anybody much about your quality as a tester. And so that's changed in that time. And it seems to have developed, where do we go like past that point, and it is more about developing testing. One thing that's remained same, is that when I started testing and still now, I still read people talking about the end of manual testing. And that seems to have remained steady, even from when people said, oh, next year nobody will be manual testing. And that was 3 years ago. And you'll see somebody say it in a month or 2 months time again. And then next year, they'll still be wrong.
So, how do you think it's going to be in 5 years' time? What's your thought process about the future?
My thought process about the future, hopefully the standards will keep getting better. I think there will be more automation tools used in some places, but I think there will be a lot less used in other places. I
Can you give some
predict that.
examples? Can you say
Well,
that?
yeah, okay. So this is my prediction, is that in 5 years' time, Google will start having more like kind of human testing or human-led testing in-house. And I think / hope that they will realize that relying on automation tools and then relying on the general public for kind of beta testing isn't the best approach. And I also hope that, that filters out, that people realize that whilst automation tools are great tools when used in the correct kind of scenario, that anybody thinking they can make this 100% kind of affair is just wrong. I think any comprehensive testing approach has to cover all bases and just take into account all the different scenarios and the best ways to test that in context. I think context-driven testing has got to just become the standard. Recently, I wrote a blog article talking about how in the history of sociology, context wasn't like immediately seen as such an important thing. We're going back 150 years, 200 years, to the very like start of that discipline. And so what I'm hoping is, now that we kind of recognize that in testing, that, in 5 years down the line, that won't be an issue anymore. That's not going to be something that's an argument. Any tester will acknowledge their context driven, because that is how to test the right way and to a high standard.
Right. Okay. It's interesting that you talk about, more human-based testing as a part of your prediction. So I was a little curious. How would you, see the role of testers evolve, sort of, because every day you hear of a new term, something like DevOps, or something like an Internet of Things, or something like big data. Every day a new buzzword comes out, and now people are more and more talking about this. So where do you see testers positioned here? And how do you think the testers need to grow themselves to cope up with the the growing terminology, if I may put it that way?
Yeah. Okay. So I think the new terms, some of them are useful, some of them aren't. I think it's hard to tell exactly. The Internet of Things is a very interesting term. I don't think it very well describes what is going on in terms of the connectivity of kind of more household objects. But in terms of what we can do as testers, in terms of how the landscape changes, we have to do, I think, what we've always done in the past. When mobile started and it became more of a thing, what did we as testers have to do? We have to learn more about the platforms, the devices, the technologies that are being used. So, if that's something as basic as a tester being able to use the Android debug bridge, that is a specific part of the technology that I think if you are testing Android on a regular basis, that's something that you need to be versed in. And I think as more different types of technology seem to grow, I don't think there's ever going to be remove the need for testers, but we testers need to continue to grow our knowledge base, because I wrote this in a blog article today, interestingly, at the heart of what we do, gaining knowledge is central. Is it about finding faults first? Well, or is it about gaining the total knowledge of a system and then seeing where those faults are? So, gaining knowledge, more specific knowledge on the new technologies, the way they interrelate to existing technologies, what potential there is for the different ways that humans can interact with the new technologies, understanding the way, if we talk about the Internet of Things, maybe understanding the way that your household light system and your toaster or your fridge might be communicating, because these are things that are going to happen. They are happening. They've been happening for a while, but as the technology becomes cheaper, it becomes more widespread, it becomes easier to implement. So I think as testers, that's what we have to do. We have to be knowledgeable, and we have to find out more and understand more about not only how the people who are creating these things think they can be used, but how we can see the different ways in which they can be used. Because there's many technologies that they've been created with one purpose in mind, or one maybe one specific way for users to interact with them. But over time, that can change depending on the scenario, the types of users using it. And I think as testers, it's for us to be aware of that, and be staying thinking about it all the time, and thinking about the different ways. So if a dev says to us, oh, here is this new system I have, look, this is our Internet of Things fridge, this is how this fridge works, and this is what it does. It is for us to think about what other ways can it be used, and what can happen if it was used in that way, and to think about these scenarios in all the in reference to all the new technologies that are coming.
Right. It's interesting that you talk about knowledge being the key thing, as far as it comes to testers. Now, when it comes to knowledge, having a knowledge of how things work will also give us an idea of how to test it, so that we could make it better for the end users. And keeping that in mind, so my next question obviously is, how do you think these meetups and conferences actually help you build in getting knowledge?
Well, you get the chance to relate to other testers. These are your peers. These are our peers, the people that we either maybe work with, or they work in similar positions to us. And we're all different. We all have our unique perspective on things. And by going to meetups, by going to conferences, and being, even if you can't physically go to the conference, the fact that you can now go onto YouTube, and the conference talk is recorded, and you can hear that perspective. That's what's useful about it, because anytime you talk to another human about how they approach something, there is so much room for you to gain more knowledge, because they will look at something in a different way to you. Even if it's a very, very slight difference, there will still be something about their perspective that is different. And by understanding that difference, you gain knowledge, always, and understanding other people's points of view, how they approach their testing, how they their thought processes when they're testing, all these things just gain and build knowledge, because you understand the way their thought processes go, and then you can question your own processes in ways maybe you never thought of before. And I think that is very important, continual questioning of your own methods, your own approaches. Just because something worked 100% of the time before, it doesn't mean it will work tomorrow.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean it will work the day after that. It
Right.
might work the day after that, but like recognizing that change and that potential for change, I think, is very important. And the other thing is just being able to relate to other people that are on your wavelength. I think that is just a good thing generally, for humans, for us to do. We can relate to other people that, maybe think in a similar way, or, are on our same kind of wavelength, are people that, when you interact with them, you can grow with each other, you can understand and learn from each other, and just enjoy spending time with people that kind of understand you and understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are your thoughts on the Global Testing Retreat 2016?
I think it looks very interesting. Before submitting the conference proposal, I hadn't really seen much of the Agile Testing Alliance or the Global Testing Retreat. But, obviously I've been reading up on the site and everything, but it looks great. I like the whole unconference thing, and what I like is that, it explicitly says that, it wants people to enjoy the event, not only for the learning, but, to have that kind of unwinding time and that fun time to, to just socialize with your peers. Because again, it's something I've kind of touched on in previous blog articles of mine, but I find kind of interacting with anything new or different to what you usually do is good for you as a tester. So whether that's like reading a book that you would never normally read, that may make you think in a slightly different way. Maybe that's a film, that's meeting somebody different, being in a different situation. Like all of these things, even though they don't directly to relate to a tester's knowledge or skill, to me what they do is they grow your mind in itself. They bring in new things into your mind, new things into your thought process. And anything that does that, I think, is good for you as a tester, and is just going to make you better as a tester.
Right. So, can you tell me a few things about your proposal? What are you going to, what have you proposed, and what are you going to be talking about? A little insight into your paper.
Okay, so a little a little spoken abstract then. So my talk is going to be centered around testing with Oculus Rift primarily, but it extends to all kind of VR equipment and VR scenarios. So testing in virtual reality. Now, this is something that I've kind of seen grow. So I remember being 12, 13, going to a computer trade show, and they had the VR kind of pods there where you went and you sat inside this whole thing, and you have the big headset that's coming out the front here, and you're playing some kind of like tank shooting game where it's just big polygons and stuff. And I remember there, 12, 13, being so excited by that. And then, now we come to today, where the headsets are lightweight, they're all very kind of, it's all become streamlined now. And because of the technology we have in terms of like game development, graphical development, all of these things are kind of coming together to like make VR like very kind of appealing and possible now. And so my talk is just based around the things I've learned since I've started testing in this domain. And, I want to use what I'm learning now to try and build resources for the community. So, the same way other testers have already, if you Google testing, I don't know, e-commerce sites, you type in Google testing e-commerce, there will be resources, blog articles, heuristics, mind maps from other testers to give, to help people in terms of how to approach these types of testing. And what I want to do now is, through the experience I'm getting working in this domain, talking about the challenges and the thoughts I'm facing, to try and grow this and, give back some more resources to the community in order to grow this part of testing. Which, this is another one of the new thing. This is one of the new domains for testers to go into.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting. And looking forward to something like that. It's very thought provoking when you said, okay, you're going to be testing, sharing thoughts about testing in the VR world. It's going to be interesting. So we can certainly look forward to that. What would be your tip or one advice to young testers, to people who are taking to software testing now? People who are new to this world of software testing.
I would say probably the first thing to do is go watch some James Back and Michael Bolton lectures. I say this because, not because I was saying they're the greatest or anything. They're very good testers and they're very good at relating their ideas. But what I think is the great thing about watching them talk is how they relate their enthusiasm and their passion for testing. And I think when you start, if you're at that kind of starting stage of testing, listening to talks from people like that who can really relate their enthusiasm and their passion is, a good way to ignite it in yourself. And, from talks like that, I would say explore all the blogs out there. There are so many great testers putting out great blogs. There are so many conferences that are putting all their talks online. Even if it's talks from like 5-10 years ago, there's still relevant things in there. So, immerse yourself in these things, read as much as you can, learn as much as you can about anything that you think is associated to your kind of domain. And, even if you don't think it's associated to your domain, but you find it interesting, read it. Maybe something that you don't find interesting, maybe read it and think about what isn't interesting about it. Try and consume as much of this knowledge as you can, I think, and then, that will help you. If you want like a quick way, I would say try and do the quick software testing courses. Don't worry so much about maybe some of the ISEB qualifications or any of those things. That was something I had to do when I started because it was part of the company policy where I worked. But I think just learn as much as you can and practice hard, because if you're a tester and you never find bugs when you are when you are just browsing the internet at home or you're using your phone generally, then you're not doing it right. Like, to me, like I've used to find this so often, like I've had to be like kind of tone it back because I was doing it too much, that I found that I was finding so many bugs in just the things that I use daily, that on my way home from the office or something, I would be replying to have 3-4 ongoing email conversations regarding bugs I'd found in things I just use in my personal life. And, there's always somewhere to find bugs, because of the way we live now and that using your phone and using the internet and all of these things are so common every day. Like, if you aren't finding bugs outside of work every day, then maybe you're not being very observant.
Right. I
You know,
mean, it's very
yeah,
interesting that you talk about that. It clearly shows how passionate you are about, the thing that you do. So, one more thing that I would think of for young testers would be to discover the passion in them, and to understand and to enjoy software testing, or
yeah,
any
yeah.
kind of work that they do. Enjoying stuff is more important. I mean, you can't be bogged down with the fact that, okay, something is not working, what the developer says is something else, and I'm having a fight with him,
Mm.
and I just give up. I mean,
Well,
that's
this
not good.
is, yeah, no, that's an interesting one. It's a very common thing I hear about, and until recently, I hadn't personally experienced like in a direct way. So my previous experience is being at an independent testing company. So we had clients from all over, but our contact with the devs was if we had contact with the devs was through the tracker or through Skype. Recently, I've been working in situations where I've been in-house, so I've been able to actively like talk to the devs face to face. And so there's that interesting thing. I was like, oh, it doesn't work like that on mine. And again, this is something else I wrote a blog article on. Um, when that happens, there's different ways to react to it, and it's very easy to get annoyed and think, oh, what's wrong with this dev? He's not paying attention to what I'm saying. Like, why isn't he? There's clearly a bug here. I've shown him a screenshot. I've shown him like an animated GIF of this bug happening over and over again. Like, there is a bug here. And, it's easy to react that way, and it's understandable. But to me, the way to react in that situation is to go, okay, so if we have a bug happening on one workstation but not another workstation, what's the difference? Like, that's the question to ask, not the question of how can I make the dev see my bug, but it's like, why is the bug not happening on his machine related to my machine? Is there some dependency or something installed on his machine that isn't on my machine, and that's why that he doesn't have this same error? Issues like this, because when you ask those questions, that's when you find out more. And
Absolutely.
yeah. Mm.
And testing is not just about finding bugs. It's about discovering the unknown, which
Yeah.
you have not seen it yet. I mean, you may have situations which may be occurring, but there may be a lot which is not seen, not discovered, because you have not made the software work in a particular way. I mean, like you said, you spoke about the Internet of Things fridge. There are many ways it will work. There are many different ways in which you might not have experienced yourself, or some other user would try and make it work some other way. Now
Well,
let's take a simple example here. I mean, when
yeah.
we buy a new TV, for example, you don't usually go through the user manual. You pick up the remote, you start
Mm.
playing around, fiddling around, and that's how you learn. And that's the typical user behavior. So it's not necessary that the way you operate your television, I would also operate in the same way. Although we may have bought the same model, for all you
Mm.
know, and you may find something on your TV which I may not, because I have still not operated it the way you have done it. So you may see, something is annoying, so you can't probably go from one channel to another without going back to the original menu or something like that. I'm just making up a situation, you
Mm.
know. So because you have experienced that, and I am habituated to go back to the menu, then swipe through the various categories of channels, and then I choose my channels. So I'll never see the situation that you have seen. So it's all about
Yeah.
personal experience. It's all about looking at things differently, and you very rightly put it. I mean, it's about exploring it, and getting to know it better.
Yeah, knowledge, more knowledge. Learn
Yes.
as much as you can, because if somebody wants to, is something that kind of a title I shy away from is QA, but it's a common kind of thing put onto software testers, and people use software tester and QA interchangeably.
Right.
But if you are somehow got to give some kind of quality or statement of quality to somebody, then unless you have a real strong knowledge of the system you are testing, then what can you talk to them about quality? What can you really tell them? You may be able to tell them that they have this show-stopping bug, but if it takes like 15 very protracted steps to reach this bug, like, how important is it in context? But if you haven't found out so much about the rest of their system, there might be things in the system that aren't inherently bugs, but they are just bad ways, like bad user interface or bad user experience. But
Right.
because you're looking for bugs, because you're maybe just looking for crashes, you're looking for things that are wrong in that way, you don't build up this knowledge of, what is this system? How do all these things interrelate to each other? You know, who is going to be using it? And if somebody else other than that person uses it, can they still, have a good user experience? There are so many questions dependent on whatever you're testing. And yeah, it's all about answering those questions and then finding more questions off the back of those answers.
Right. Well, it's been a very interesting conversation with you, Saeed, this evening.
Thank you.
I
My
mean,
pleasure.
yeah, I thank you for your time, and we will soon catch up and discuss more about your proposal and take things forward. So I would like to thank you on behalf of Agile Testing Alliance for submitting your proposal and then for giving us your time. Uh, I know you are pretty busy. It would be worthwhile to share your your blog page details, your Twitter details. You could do that with me, and then I will propagate it further so that people get to know about all the cool stuff that you've been doing in the VR world, especially. Where that makes me really excited. So I am very eager to learn more. So really a huge thank you to you, say this evening.
Big thanks to you and everybody at the Agile Testing Alliance. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. Much
Fantastic.
appreciated.
Yeah. So we'll talk soon once again. Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.